Physicists have stumbled upon a frightening anomaly that shatters the very essence of the universe. Calculations have always shown a perfect and elegant balance in the quantum world. Researchers expected only routine confirmation of their time-tested theories. The equipment was supposed to simply record the predicted decay of subatomic particles. Instead, ultra-sensitive detectors captured a process that is completely impossible from a scientific standpoint. All of modern science is entirely based on the so-called Standard Model. This theoretical framework has worked flawlessly for many long decades. It described the behavior of absolutely all known particles in the universe with striking accuracy. Scientists considered it the most reliable and perfect tool for understanding reality. According to all strict mathematical laws, the microcosm should be a predictable place. For a long time, fundamental physics seemed like a fully understood and logical discipline. Engineers built increasingly complex detectors to confirm old and well-established truths. Huge superconducting magnets directed streams of protons with incredible surgical precision. Computer systems recorded the results of collisions with perfect, flawless precision. It would seem that science was simply bound to put the final nail in the coffin of its research. A tiny element of matter called the charm quark has recently been the focus of attention. This subatomic particle has always been considered well-studied and quite standard. Scientists have successfully observed its rapid decay in laboratory conditions many times. Theory strictly dictated exactly how this microscopic process should occur. The laws of symmetry required an equal production of electrons and muons during such a decay. But new data from detectors revealed a completely different, extremely alarming picture. The decay of quarks began to occur with a flagrant violation of all established physical laws. Significantly more ordinary electrons appeared than their heavier muon counterparts. Such an imbalance had always been considered absolutely impossible within the framework of conventional physics. Researchers logically attributed this strange result to a routine error in the old equipment. For months on end, they checked the most complex algorithms for processing the collected data. Engineers tested the sensors and rewrote the software code of massive supercomputers. But the stubborn anomaly did not disappear. It only became alarmingly clear. This discovery directly threatens the fundamental principle of lepton universality. This rule has always guaranteed the strict mathematical equivalence of all such particles in the universe. If it is indeed violated, then modern science has been profoundly and fatally mistaken. The entire invisible structure of the quantum world turns out to be built according to entirely different laws. Scientists suddenly encountered a phenomenon that is fundamentally impossible to describe using the old equations. There is a persistent sense of a global systemic failure in the very fabric of reality. Initially, physicists hoped to find a simple and logical explanation for this phenomenon. They reanalyzed the vast petabytes of data from the collider's various sensors. Scientists enlisted the best minds on the planet to re-examine the mathematical models they had created. No one wanted to believe in the total collapse of all fundamental Earth science. Every new technical verification was supposed to bring the world back to its familiar safe course. However, the results stubbornly and relentlessly confirmed the existence of an impossible structural anomaly. A gradually mounting sense of alarm began to sweep through the global scientific community. The situation was rapidly moving beyond the realm of a simple laboratory curiosity or instrument error. The observed quantum phenomenon breaks the rules by which every star operates. Our familiar physics suddenly turned out to be merely a convenient, yet completely false illusion. Humanity found itself on the threshold of the most terrifying scientific revolution in its history. For a long time, the global scientific community has relied on an incredibly solid foundation of knowledge. the Standard Model faithfully served as a flawless blueprint for the entire boundless physical world. It perfectly described the interactions of the tiniest building blocks of all existing matter. Physicists were genuinely proud of this incredibly precise and mathematically elegant theory. For nearly half a century, every new discovery only confirmed its absolute correctness. This concept united generations of researchers toward a single great goal. This theory became the greatest achievement of the human mind in the 20th century. For decades, hundreds of the planet's finest minds labored painstakingly to create this coherent picture of the universe. They were able to unite scattered facts into a single, crystal-clear coordinate system. Each new generation of scientists invariably found in it a reliable foundation for their bold research. It seemed utterly impossible to find even the slightest flaw in such a monumental scientific edifice. Scientists sincerely believed in the immutability of the laws they had discovered. For many years, researchers pieced together this unimaginably complex puzzle step by step. They discovered new elementary particles and carefully fitted them into the overall, well-ordered framework. Gradually, the primordial chaos of the microcosm took on clear contours and a strict internal logic. Quarks and leptons were discovered, from which absolutely all visible matter is composed. Each such unique discovery became a true celebration for the academic world. Theorists rejoiced, seeing practical confirmation of their bold calculations. All matter was logically divided into three so-called generations of particles. The first generation formed the familiar visible world: stars, planets, and living beings. The second and third generations consisted of much heavier and more exotic elements. They appeared for only a fraction of a second during powerful cosmic cataclysms. Such a strict classification allowed scientists to easily navigate the zoo of the microcosm. Order seemed absolute and unbreakable at all levels of existence. No detail in this vast system existed on its own. All elements were connected by a strict and inseparable mathematical relationship. Physicists could describe the birth of light and heat using just a few elegant equations. The language of mathematics proved to be the ideal tool for reading nature's most important book. All that remained was to gradually translate this knowledge into practical, everyday applications. Science became the main driver of global technological progress. The formulas of the Standard Model captivated the imagination with their inner beauty and conciseness. All the fundamental physics of the known cosmos fit into just a few pages of text. Scientists could calculate the outcome of any particle collision with astonishing precision. No other scientific theory in history had yielded such striking and accurate results. This fostered a sense of profound intellectual superiority over the mysteries of nature. The academic world basked in the well-deserved laurels of victory. The principle of lepton universality held a special and paramount place in this flawless system. This fundamental rule strictly stated that certain related particles must behave in exactly the same way. Different leptons were required to interact with the surrounding world in an absolutely identical manner. Their only physical difference was always recognized as being merely their different rest masses. Nature was never supposed to give artificial preference to any of these specific particles. Any injustice at this level was considered completely impossible. A striking example of a lepton is the ordinary electron, familiar to humanity through electric current. Muons, on the other hand, are its heavier and rarer unstable counterparts. However, the strict laws of physics demanded that they react in exactly the same way to any external forces. This rule was a kind of ironclad law of equality in the tiny subatomic world. Any violation of this fundamental law would inevitably destroy the entire logic of physical science. The rule of universality worked flawlessly in all experiments conducted. Later, Physicists discovered another member of this family called the tau lepton. It turned out to be even heavier than the muon, but still obeyed the general strict rule of equality. All three lepton siblings reacted to the weak nuclear interaction in exactly the same way, with the exception of their mass. This discovery became yet another brilliant confirmation of the global theory's correctness. The Standard Model once again proved its incredible predictive power. Physicists celebrated as they looked at the new, perfect graphs and tables. This unshakable confidence of the theorists was backed by years of continuous observations and the most complex practical calculations. Giant European accelerators reliably delivered terabytes of data confirming this theory. Powerful electronic supercomputers processed data around the clock without the slightest sign of a system failure. Global scientific institutions operated as a single, incredibly well-oiled mechanism of knowledge. None of the authoritative experts even doubted the solidity of the grandiose intellectual edifice they had built. To doubt the Standard Model had simply become a matter of bad taste. To test these laws, the largest machines in the history of civilization were built. Huge ring tunnels stretched deep underground along the borders of European countries. Inside them, particles were accelerated to speeds incredibly close to the speed of light itself. The energies of the collisions mimicked the conditions of the first moments after the Big Bang. And even under such extreme conditions, the laws of conservation worked flawlessly. Nature obediently revealed its secrets under the pressure of powerful magnets and detectors. The historic discovery of the Higgs boson marked the absolute pinnacle of triumph for this complex physical model. This long-awaited and elusive particle finally closed the complex chain of theoretical constructs. It was this particle that invisibly endowed all the other building blocks of the vast universe with their fundamental mass. Scientists joyfully celebrated the long-awaited completion of a monumental stage in understanding the entire structure of the cosmos. At the time, it seemed that there were absolutely no more blind spots left in subatomic particle physics. The picture of the world had received its final and most important brushstroke. The search for this elusive boson took the scientific community several long decades. Theoretical physicists had predicted its existence long before the technology needed to detect it became available. Engineers had to achieve a true technological breakthrough to build the necessary collider. When the signal was finally detected, it became a global sensation. Physicists genuinely rejoiced right during the official presentation of the results. It was a moment of the highest unity of human intellect. Following this monumental and historic success, a long era of academic calm ensued. The physical world seemed like an incredibly cozy, crystal clear, and completely safe place. Absolutely any physical phenomenon could be easily broken down into understandable, simple components. The previously derived formulas worked flawlessly under absolutely any conditions and over any vast distances. Global cosmology was built on a firm conviction in the unshakable stability of the microcosm. Scientists felt a pleasant sense of duty fulfilled toward future generations. Humanity looked very proudly toward its future from the lofty heights of its scientific achievements. All that remained for researchers was the tedious task of refining minor mathematical details of processes already known to the world. No one seriously expected any major revolutions or upheavals in the foreseeable future. Professors at leading universities confidently lectured from long-established and proven textbooks. Students memorized rigorous formulas with complete confidence in their absolute permanence. Physics was gradually transforming from a science of discovery into a science of precise measurement. Writing scientific papers had become a routine statement of long-known and obvious facts. New publications merely added thousandths of a percent to the accuracy of old measurements. Academic degrees were awarded for meticulous and methodical work with vast amounts of statistical data. The romance of great scientific breakthroughs and unexpected flashes of insight gradually faded into the past. The global architecture of reality had been built up to its very highest peak. All that remained was to polish the facades and dust off the gleaming formulas. It was expected that all new research would merely cement the existing global quantum order. Giant underground colliders continued their incredibly monotonous work of violently colliding protons. Physicists merely planned to gradually increase the energy for the tedious search for extremely rare natural phenomena. They simply wanted to add a few new elegant touches to the perfect mathematical portrait of reality. The situation was completely and unconditionally under the strict control of the entire academic community. Deviations from the norm were considered nothing more than trivial equipment errors. Huge rings of super-powerful accelerators deep underground continued to reliably accelerate clouds of particles. Engineers stood watch at their monitors, awaiting entirely predictable and completely ordinary results. Every microscopic collision was recorded and carefully stored in gigantic electronic databases. The global search for answers followed pre-established and well-lit paths. All scientific articles were published strictly within the rigid framework of the established, unshakable global paradigm. A single step off course was severely punished by the loss of one's impeccable scientific reputation. Any alternative or overly bold hypotheses were dismissed as amusing and meaningless fringe fantasies. The Standard Model quickly attained the unshakable status of absolute truth in the final instance. Any public doubt regarding its validity was immediately regarded as a sign of profound unprofessionalism. Most authoritative scientists simply refused outright to spend time testing extravagant alternative theories. Science seemed to have frozen forever in its own majestic and unshakable perfection. The search for truth gave way to the guardianship of monuments already erected. Such scientific dogmatism has always harbored a huge hidden danger for progress. When researchers stop asking uncomfortable questions, the process of learning comes to a complete halt. Confidence in one's own correctness leads to the neglect of tiny but extremely important details. Great discoveries are often hidden precisely in those places where no one wants to look. But during that period, academic pride overshadowed caution and healthy scientific skepticism. Physicists stopped listening to the quiet whisper of nature. However, wild and unpredictable nature has absolutely no tolerance for human self-assurance and rigid dogmas. Deep within the invisible subatomic world, a destructive systemic crisis was already quietly brewing. The ideal academic architecture of reality concealed a catastrophic, invisible, fundamental vulnerability. The familiar, strict laws were preparing to deliver their first truly serious and devastating failure. The human world stood right on the threshold of a terrifying collapse of its fundamental illusions. The clockwork mechanism of the universe began to make very strange sounds. This brewing crisis was completely invisible to the naked human eye. It was unfolding on a scale where the familiar concepts of space and time lost their meaning. Mathematical formulas still looked flawless, but reality itself was preparing to rebel. The old blueprints were soon to become utterly useless scraps of paper. The scientific world slept peacefully, barely suspecting the powerful quantum storm approaching. And the awakening promised to be incredibly abrupt and painful for everyone. This cozy illusion of complete, total control was shattered on a perfectly ordinary day. Ultra-precise detectors recorded an event that completely nullified decades of painstaking scientific work. The decay process of the so-called charming quarks suddenly followed a completely unpredictable and strange scenario. Instead of perfect natural symmetry, the sophisticated equipment stubbornly produced a highly distorted mathematical result. The invisible quantum world suddenly ceased to obey its own most fundamental and proven laws. The rules of the game changed without warning. This anomaly was detected inside a specialized detector at the Large Hadron Collider. This gigantic machine was built specifically to study the behavior of extremely rare and heavy elements. Physicists closely monitored the birth and death of particles following powerful head-on collisions of protons. The process ran automatically, and the systems analyzed millions of events every second. No one expected to see anything revolutionary or alarming in these routine reports. The machine was simply doing its usual job of collecting colossal amounts of data. Charming quarks have always been considered very important and highly revealing elements in physicists' laboratories. They exist for only a fraction of a second before finally transforming into other particles. They can only be detected by the specific trail they leave in multilayer sensors. Their short lifespan has always been of immense interest for understanding the deep structure of all matter. Scientists were well aware of all the theoretical possibilities regarding exactly how the path of these particles should end. Every transformation had long been described and mathematically proven. Creating a single such quark requires a colossal amount of concentrated energy. Under normal terrestrial conditions, such heavy elements simply cannot exist. They are born exclusively in the depths of stars or in the artificial tunnels of powerful accelerators. This is precisely why studying them requires the most advanced technologies on the planet. Scientists literally have to wrest these secrets from the cold silence of the microcosm. Every successful experiment costs astronomical sums and many years of preparation. Usually, such unstable quarks decay into an absolutely equal number of light electrons and heavy muons. But this time, the familiar natural balance was incredibly and ruthlessly disrupted. The machines recorded a clear and inexplicable mathematical preference for light particles. The balance, which was supposed to be exactly 50-50, suddenly shifted dramatically. It was as impossible as flipping a coin and getting heads 100 times in a row. Nature seemed to be mocking the rigorous calculations of authoritative theorists. Light electrons appeared in this strange decay significantly more often than heavy, unstable muons. This physical fact came as a massive shock to everyone present in the research laboratory. The Standard Model had always categorically ruled out such an uneven and utterly unfair distribution of particles. Nature had suddenly begun to brazenly cheat in its own fundamental and unpredictable mathematical game. The electronic data obtained looked like an incredibly gross systemic error in the very fabric of the universe. Common sense refused to accept such results. The hope of attributing it all to a silly technical glitch melted away completely and irrevocably in the cold air. The real problem lay not in the electronics at all, but in the most basic quantum physics. The heavy quarks under study truly behaved as if the old laws of physics simply did not exist. They were clearly interacting with something completely invisible, utterly alien, and entirely unexplored. This recorded quantum anomaly became the very first loud warning signal of a global scientific catastrophe. The world turned out to be far more complex than had been generally believed. The level of certainty of this discovery was measured in special statistical units called sigmas by physicists. Scientists require a 5 sigma level to declare a random coincidence a full-fledged scientific discovery. The detector's data was gradually and very confidently approaching this critical mathematical threshold. With each new graph, the probability of a mere error rapidly melted away right before our eyes. What began as a tiny suspicion quickly turned into an indisputable fact. The statistics became a merciless verdict on the old, comfortable dogmas. The recorded violation of lepton universality signifies the inevitable collapse of the entire existing academic system of knowledge. If these fundamental particles are not fundamentally equal, then all past earthly calculations instantly lose all meaning. Our vast universe is governed by powerful hidden mechanisms about which humans know absolutely nothing. The old, solid foundation of science simply crumbled into radioactive dust right before the astonished researchers' eyes. Physicists were forced to come face to face with an incredibly frightening and cold new reality. Physics textbooks suddenly turned into collections of outdated, beautiful fairy tales. The consequences of this deeply unsettling discovery extend far beyond the confines of sterile laboratory walls. This microscopic quantum imbalance instantly gives rise to colossal, unsolvable problems on a macroscopic, universal scale. The discovered systemic error in the behavior of quarks mercilessly drags along an incredibly long chain of logical paradoxes. It casts enormous doubt on the stability of all matter at the most basic and profound energy levels. The absolutely stable atoms we are accustomed to may conceal within themselves a huge, unpredictable, and deadly danger. The structure of existence has turned out to be incredibly, terrifyingly fragile. If the rules of the game can change on the fly, no one can guarantee the safety of the entire universe. Stars may burn in a way completely different from what the best minds in astrophysics have assumed for decades. Planetary systems may be strictly subject to hidden variables capable of destroying them at any moment. Scientists realized that they had been trying to control the ocean while knowing only the basic structure of a single drop of water. The macroscopic world turned out to be inextricably and extremely dangerously linked to the chaos of the microscopic world. This forced a completely new perspective on the evolutionary processes of entire vast galaxies. A safe and completely understandable world suddenly turned into a dark, unexplored territory of absolute scientific uncertainty. A rather frightening hypothesis arose regarding the existence of a completely new and powerful force of nature, perhaps unknown heavy particles, of which we have no inkling, are hiding in the absolute void. They are capable of secretly and invisibly influencing the decay of familiar elements and shattering all earthly mathematical calculations. This bold idea quickly robbed hundreds of the world's most distinguished theorists of their peaceful sleep. A real panic broke out in high-level, closed academic circles. New hypotheses emerged regarding the existence of entirely new carriers of fundamental interactions. Some researchers called them leptquarks, suggesting that they might combine the properties of different families of particles. Other physicists began actively constructing models involving heavy and mysterious bosons of a new type. Each such assumption required a radical and very painful reevaluation of all the laws of physics. This meant that behind the standard model lies an even more grandiose and complex architecture, and humanity has yet to find the right keys to it. Many experienced researchers spent years desperately trying to find at least some simple, logical explanation for this phenomenon. They frantically and hastily built incredibly complex theoretical superstructures atop the rapidly crumbling standard model. Physicists tentatively proposed compromise hypotheses about hidden measurement errors and natural background quantum noise. Absolutely none of them wanted to voluntarily admit crushing defeat in the face of this completely new, terrifying mystery. But the cruel, impartial mathematics stubbornly continued to reveal the presence of a deep and irreparable structural defect. The stubborn facts easily defeated any elegant excuses. Attempts to save the old model strongly resembled patching up huge holes in a sinking ocean liner. Each new equation only complicated the overall picture, making it unnatural and extremely cumbersome. Nature always gravitates toward elegant and simple solutions, not toward multi-story, complex mathematical crutches. It was becoming perfectly clear that a simple cosmetic overhaul of physical theory would not help here. What was needed was the complete demolition of the old building and the construction of an entirely new foundation. But no one yet knew exactly where to begin this monumental undertaking. Ultra-sensitive detectors continued tirelessly to gather new information day and night without the slightest technical interruption. Conservative scientists secretly hoped that the strange anomalous effect would simply dissipate or disappear on its own over time. However, nature proved to be incredibly stubborn and consistent in its new, rigid rules. The more high-energy, large-scale collisions were conducted, the clearer and more distinct this profound defect became. The statistical significance of the discovery grew steadily with each new month of the collider's monotonous operation. Hopes for a systematic error vanished without a trace. This mysterious anomaly had finally transformed from a random instrumental fluctuation into a harsh, hundredfold confirmed scientific fact. It was no longer possible to simply arrogantly brush aside this terrifying, ironclad fact or tightly close one's eyes to it. Earth's academic science was forced to engage in a difficult and unequal struggle against the utterly unknowable quantum element. The world's leading cutting-edge laboratories urgently pooled their colossal efforts to unravel this unprecedented mystery. Yesterday's bitter rivals instantly became allies in the face of an unknown and terrifying cosmic threat. There arose an urgent need for a collective global intellect. The global scientific community began urgently exchanging raw data and the latest hypotheses. Conferences of physicists quickly turned into arenas of fierce debate over the future of fundamental science. New research programs were launched, aimed exclusively at studying this specific phenomenon. Budgets were reallocated, and the world's focus shifted to the strange behavior of heavy quarks. History had not seen such a mobilization of intellectual resources in several long decades. Scientists once again experienced the forgotten thrill of genuine scientific intrigue. Suddenly and painfully, it turned out that the vast universe was under no obligation whatsoever to conform to naive human expectations. Cold and indifferent nature turned out to be far more cunning, dangerous, and unpredictably inventive than human weak, limited intellect. The revealed strange quantum mystery brought with it only a deep, primal existential fear of the looming infinity. What is actually happening inside quarks right now is simply physically impossible to describe in ordinary, understandable words. It is a completely alien, cold, universal logic, securely and deeply hidden far beyond the limits of our perception. Humans have turned out to be merely tiny guests in this complex world. The scale of this paradigm shift can only be compared to the birth of quantum mechanics itself a century ago. Back then, classical physics was also utterly powerless in the face of the incredible mysteries of the atomic nucleus. Now history has taken another turn on the endless spiral of global scientific progress. Humanity is once again facing a very painful breakdown of familiar patterns of thought. This painful process will be accompanied by many mistakes, disappointments, and dead-end paths of development. But there is simply no other way to a true understanding of the structure of the cosmos. Physicists realized with immense horror and trepidation that until now, they had seen only the tiny tip of a gigantic iceberg. Beyond the narrow confines of the familiar standard model lies a vast, raging ocean of completely unknown colossal energies. Sooner or later, humanity will have to completely rewrite absolutely all fundamental classical academic textbooks. The deep crack that appeared in the standard model began to spread rapidly and completely uncontrollably in all directions. It completely and mercilessly swallowed up the calm confidence in the future of all fundamental global science. The era of great quantum uncertainty has arrived. Old, reliable, and time-tested methods can no longer guarantee safe and absolutely accurate results. The greatest minds on the planet must now urgently seek entirely new, non-standard approaches to studying the terrifying microcosm. Every new upcoming discovery may bring even more unsolvable, complex, and truly terrifying questions. Scientists have suddenly found themselves thrown back a whole century in their basic understanding of the structure of the boundless cosmos. They face the painful and difficult task of learning to walk anew in this completely new, strange, and potentially hostile reality. And this long, thorny path of discovery promises to be incredibly dark, unpredictably complex, and terrifying. Initially, there was a faint hope in scientific circles that this problem was purely local in nature. Researchers naively believed that the anomalies were strictly limited to the specific conditions of a single experiment. Scientists desperately tried to attribute the quantum anomaly to the unique energy levels of the European collider. At the time, it seemed that outside this laboratory, familiar physics continued to function perfectly normally. This belief in the stability of the world helped the professors maintain their composure. However, alarming signals soon began to arrive from other corners of the planet. Independent global verifications incredibly quickly shattered this last, fragile line of defense. Other research centers immediately began conducting their own large-scale measurements of quarks. Laboratory directors around the world were ordered to urgently recheck their old archives. Everyone held their breath in anticipation of the first results. High-precision detectors in various countries around the world began simultaneously recording exactly the same deviations. Data from Japanese underground accelerators confirmed the controversial European results with frightening mathematical precision. An impossible anomaly began to appear consistently in completely different scientific databases across the planet. It had become impossible to hide what was happening, even with the strongest desire to do so. The global scientific community was abuzz with discussion of this strange phenomenon. This phenomenon turned out not to be a random local error, but a global and brutal rule of reality. This problem instantly took on the character of a massive systemic infection of all observable physical space. The quarks under study are behaving abnormally at absolutely every point in our vast universe. This directly implies that an invisible quantum defect permeates the entire fabric of infinite cosmic space. There is not a single safe corner where the laws would operate as they used to. The stable matter that surrounds us was originally constructed according to distorted and completely incorrect blueprints. The realization of this terrifying fact is now causing genuine panic among all leading astrophysicists. Everyone understands that if the basic building blocks break, the entire structure is under grave threat. The laws of invisible quantum mechanics always strictly dictate the behavior of giant stars and black holes. The microcosm and the macrocosm have turned out to be linked by a single common flaw. The error that has arisen at the quark level is inevitably extrapolated to vast intergalactic distances. The observable universe instantly ceases to be the safe, predictable place we thought it was. It suddenly transforms into a completely alien, unpredictable, and potentially hostile environment. We can no longer trust the light of distant stars, which has been traveling toward us for millions of years. Even the very void between galaxies may conceal fatal systemic failures. Scientists are realizing with growing horror the true scale of their long-standing total physical ignorance. Absolutely all past astronomical calculations now require critical review and complete re-examination. The natural evolution of the universe could very well have followed a completely different, unpredictable and obscure path of development. For centuries, we have observed the cosmos through the incredibly warped and severely distorted prism of the Standard Model. All this time, our best telescopes have shown us nothing but a convenient fairy tale. The true, authentic face of the universe is securely hidden behind a dense veil of completely unknown fundamental interactions. The phenomenon of the violation of quantum universality operates like a treacherous and destructive systemic computer virus. It very quietly infects absolutely all levels of physical reality, remaining unnoticed for many decades. Humanity has only now begun to notice the first symptoms of this terrible and incurable quantum disease. This disease has struck the very geometry of our space. We have absolutely no idea how deeply this virus has penetrated the fundamental structure of space. It is quite possible that the very concept of physical stability is merely a temporary and very fragile illusion. The overall situation is rapidly deteriorating with every new data set received from the colliders. The detected anomaly does not disappear at all when methods are changed or when sensitive equipment is recalibrated. It seems to mock people's attempts to bring order to the calculations. The anomaly is becoming increasingly aggressive, stable, and evident in complex mathematical calculations. Cold nature seems to be deliberately demonstrating to scientists their absolute and irreversible intellectual powerlessness. The feeble human mind has run up against an utterly impenetrable wall of primordial quantum chaos. None of the old logical tricks can help us find the right solution here anymore. We find ourselves in a situation where our language cannot describe what is happening. Huge government budgets are now being allocated to the urgent search for a way out of this scientific impasse. Leading theorists are working around the clock, desperately trying to piece together the rapidly crumbling picture of the physical world. However, every new bold hypothesis proposed seems even crazier than the previous working version. It is becoming clear to everyone that this fundamental problem cannot be solved using the old, familiar tools. Old computers simply cannot handle such a volume of illogical data. A completely new, incredibly radical, and quite frightening perspective on the entire structure of the universe is required. Attempts to arrogantly ignore this breakdown no longer work at all within the academic scientific community. The crack that has appeared has widened so much that it is clearly visible to the naked eye of every ordinary student. Scientific conferences have turned into venues for heated and sometimes hopeless debates about the future. The familiar authority of the great academics of the past has begun to crumble before our very eyes. Modern physics has come perilously close to the most dangerous threshold in its incredibly long history. Just beyond this invisible threshold, the familiar rules come to a complete end, and absolute uncertainty begins. And there is simply no way back to the comfortable, bright world of old formulas. We are forced to move forward into complete darkness, where no beacons work. Every action we take could lead to unpredictable global consequences. Weak humanity has found itself trapped in a reality it fundamentally and completely fails to understand. Our cozy planetary home is built on a foundation ready to collapse at any moment. The subatomic microcosm conceals colossal forces capable of instantly erasing all our accumulated knowledge. These mysterious forces are at work right now, deep within every single atom on Earth. They influence our health, our thoughts, and life itself. This invisible threat has already become an inseparable part of our daily physical existence. We continue to go to work and raise children, but the sword of Damocles, a quantum breakdown, hangs over us. Reality no longer guarantees us its eternal and unshakable stability. Scientists merely watch in silence as the old world slowly fades into oblivion. The chapter of human history titled Knowledge has suddenly been replaced by a chapter titled Survival. Suddenly, this fundamental problem went far beyond the study of the decay of tiny subatomic particles. Scientists gradually began to link this anomaly to other utterly unsolvable mysteries of the cosmos. For decades, astronomers have been racking their brains in vain over the phenomenon of vast, invisible dark matter. Huge, luminous galaxies rotate too quickly, grossly violating the laws of familiar Newtonian gravity. They must clearly be held together by some colossal mass that is completely invisible to our instruments. This hidden force acts like an invisible glue for all the star clusters in the sky. Without it, the Milky Way would have long since scattered into pieces in all directions. We see the light of the stars, but we do not see what actually governs their motion. For years, physicists have tried to find an explanation within the framework of the fields and energies known to us. But time and again, mathematical models reached a dead end when confronted with reality. The old standard model could never logically explain the nature of this gigantic hidden mass. For many years, physicists searched unsuccessfully and desperately for dark matter particles in their underground detectors. They built huge tanks of xenon deep in the mountains, hoping to catch at least one signal. But dark matter remained cold and completely indifferent to human efforts. And now, the strange behavior of quarks offers a frighteningly logical answer to this long-standing question. The detected anomaly may well be a direct trace of a weak interaction with this invisible dark sector. The quantum world under study and the vast dark cosmos have suddenly been linked by a terrifying thread of absolute uncertainty. This bold hypothesis instantly and radically changes the scale of the global scientific catastrophe unfolding before us. It forces us to admit that we see only a tiny fraction of the true picture. Behind the scenes of reality, a completely different game is being played, one we cannot comprehend. If tiny quarks truly sense dark matter, then it must be having an incredibly active influence on reality. This invisible substance makes up the overwhelming majority of the mass of the entire vast universe we can observe. It turns out that we all live in a world that is completely controlled by hidden and incredibly powerful forces. All the familiar visible matter we know is merely a pitiful froth on the surface of a vast, dark ocean. We are simply dust on the surface of something infinitely vast and alien. The cosmos surrounding us is no longer merely an empty and lifeless black backdrop. It is incredibly densely filled with an unknown structure that strictly dictates its harsh rules of the game. This gigantic dark structure constantly interacts with our atoms through mechanisms completely unknown to science. The anomalous decay of quarks is merely a tiny quantum ripple caused by the movement of gigantic invisible waves. Our instruments detect only the echoes of these grandiose and terrifying processes. Humanity has suddenly found itself in the humiliating role of a blind observer in an infinitely complex and alien world. The realization of this terrifying fact now causes deep existential anxiety among all leading researchers. We arrogantly build our civilization, relying on the physics of an insignificant fraction of all visible matter. All our grand achievements and advanced technologies function reliably only within a very narrow range. It is as if we have built a castle on sand during a strong tide. Just beyond the limits of our understanding, colossal forces rage, capable of instantly tearing apart the very fabric of space. And we can do absolutely nothing to oppose them or even attempt to control them in any way. Scientists look at modern graphs of the distribution of enormous cosmic masses with undisguised horror. Heavy dark matter, in a dense, invisible ring, mercilessly squeezes every shining galaxy we can see. Space no longer seems to us like a place for future journeys and discoveries. It is penetrating our planet, our biological bodies, and every high-precision instrument we have created right now. Its constant, silent presence weighs on the psyche of astrophysicists far more heavily than any mathematical paradox. We are merely helpless captives deep within this gigantic, invisible gravitational web. Every breath we take and every beat of our hearts occurs within this dark cloud. No armor and no walls can protect us from this intrusion. The quantum anomaly in the collider became the very first narrow window into this frightening and alien sector. Ultra-sensitive detectors were finally able to detect a fleeting physical contact between two completely different physical worlds. This faint contact proved strong enough to completely break the fundamental symmetry of light and heavy particles. It is terrifying to even imagine what these hidden forces are capable of in a full-scale, open interaction. The boundary between the worlds turned out to be much thinner than we had previously assumed. The veil of a long-standing mystery has lifted slightly, revealing a terrifying and incredibly deep abyss to the astonished researchers. It is quite possible that it is precisely the ubiquitous dark matter that is directly responsible for the great silence of the entire universe. It may well successfully act as an absolutely insurmountable barrier to any directed radio signals. Quantum fields unknown to science may be incredibly effective at dampening the artificial electromagnetic waves of other advanced civilizations. Space is silent, not because there is no one there. If this is indeed the case, then we will never again hear the voices of other intelligent, inhabited worlds. A vast, dark ocean mercilessly swallows up absolutely any information without the slightest chance of its survival. Our familiar reality has suddenly turned out to be a far more hostile and strictly closed physical system. The cold cosmos is in no way waiting for explorers and has absolutely no desire to share its hidden secrets. We have simply been locked in a dark room with no windows or doors. It jealously guards its quantum foundations against any primitive attempts at feeble human interference. The anomaly with the charming quarks is a very stern natural warning against any further penetration into its depths. The natural world starkly reveals the harsh limits of our intellectual and technological development. We have reached a door that we are strictly forbidden to open. Any attempt to break this lock could result in instant disaster. Leading physicists have found themselves facing a completely unknowable and practically omnipotent invisible adversary. This strange adversary has absolutely no form, yet it firmly controls the entire vast mass of the universe. It mercilessly shatters the standard model with ease, leaving modern science absolutely no chance. A deep study of quark decay has suddenly turned into observing a gigantic, invisible cosmic monster. We feel its movement in every instrument and every number on the screen. And right now, this enormous monster is breathing silently right into our frightened faces. There is no longer any point in pretending that we are in control of the situation in our laboratory. All we can do is wait and hope that this ancient creature does not take an excessive interest in us. Science has turned into a quiet whisper in the face of nature's infinite and dark power. Our story has reached a conclusion we never planned to write. If invisible dark matter truly exists, it must somehow physically affect the surrounding world. The four fundamental forces of nature known to science are completely incapable of logically explaining this strange quantum anomaly. Scientists had to admit a massive lack of basic knowledge about the structure of the cosmos. The old laws of physics failed spectacularly at the slightest encounter with this new mystery. It became perfectly clear that classical mathematical calculations no longer worked. Physicists found themselves faced with a completely incomprehensible natural phenomenon. Ordinary gravity is too weak to influence such deep microscopic processes. It effectively governs the motion of massive planets, but is completely useless inside a tiny atom. Electromagnetism also consistently operates on entirely different principles and never exhibits such strange failures. Strong and weak nuclear interactions are strictly confined to the incredibly tiny scales of the atomic nucleus. Their influence simply cannot reach the processes observed by the researchers. To explain the bizarre behavior of quarks, it was necessary to urgently seek a different solution. The scientific community had to completely step outside the bounds of familiar and safe academic thinking. Researchers around the world began seriously discussing the emergence of a completely new element in the structure of the universe. They put forward a hypothesis about the existence of a fifth fundamental force of nature. This is a completely new, incredibly powerful type of physical interaction in the vast universe. Previously, it was completely unknown to all of Earth's science and had never appeared in any calculations. The discovery of this hidden power came as a real shock to all theorists. This mysterious force is capable of easily disrupting basic symmetry and breaking the established order. It can give a clear mathematical preference to certain elementary particles during decays. This force constantly operates like a giant invisible puppeteer, pulling the delicate strings of the entire quantum world. And it is precisely this universal energy that stubbornly forces the lovely quarks to decay in stark violation of all established rules. Its interference seems like a crude mockery of human logic. It is as if nature deliberately hid this complex mechanism until the very last moment. The official recognition of this new fundamental force instantly changes absolutely everything about the structure of the known world. This is by no means just a minor addition to a standard high school physics textbook. Such a discovery requires a complete rewriting of all the basic laws of the surrounding reality. Humanity will have to reformulate the principles by which all matter exists. All the accumulated body of knowledge suddenly turned out to be merely a special case of an entirely different physics. The foundations of science are cracking at the seams due to the emergence of a single unknown factor. The newly discovered fifth force may well possess completely unpredictable and very frightening physical properties. It is capable of influencing matter on a massive scale in ways that researchers cannot even imagine at present. The familiar order of things has suddenly become much more complex and many times more dangerous for any biological form of life. No one knows exactly what destructive processes might be triggered by this hidden energy. Laboratory experiments have only slightly opened the door to a completely dark room. Behind that door may lie a threat of global cosmic proportions. Theoretical physicists cautiously suggest that this unknown force is transmitted through entirely new particles. These are mysterious particles that have never before been detected by Earth-based instruments. Physicists have named them hypothetical heavy bosons. They act as the primary carriers of this utterly alien and incomprehensible interaction. The mass of these particles must be so enormous that it is extremely difficult to achieve, even with the most powerful modern accelerators. This is precisely why they have remained hidden from the attention of inquisitive researchers for so long. These particles, which are enormous by quantum standards, appear in a perfect vacuum for an imperceptibly small fraction of a millisecond. Their lifespan is incredibly short, yet they are packed with colossal hidden energy. However, their faint, fleeting influence is quite enough to permanently and irrevocably alter the usual course of quark decay. Like ghosts, they appear out of nowhere and quickly carry out their invisible work. This process cannot be directly observed due to the severe limitations of human technology. Scientists see only the final result of this crude quantum intervention. These new bosons reliably serve as an invisible bridge between ordinary matter and the dark, completely unexplored sector. Through such tiny spatial punctures, a constant exchange of colossal energies takes place. And it is precisely through this quantum bridge that primordial cosmic chaos penetrates the familiar physical world. Total structural instability is gradually becoming the primary rule of existence for the entire known universe. The old laws of energy conservation are beginning to operate with strange and inexplicable discrepancies. The ideal mechanism of the cosmos has proven susceptible to critical internal failures. If the hypothetical fifth force is real, it can certainly act everywhere without any restrictions. This energy permeates every millimeter of the vast, cold cosmos. Humanity has simply never noticed its presence due to the incredible limitations of its electronic devices. Classical detectors were originally designed to search for entirely different physical phenomena. They are blind to anything that falls outside the familiar spectrum. For centuries, people have viewed the world through a very narrow keyhole. Human biological senses are also completely ill-suited for perceiving such subtle phenomena. Evolution prepared the species for survival in the wild, not for the study of multidimensional quantum spaces. This omnipresent force may well be secretly influencing the long-term evolution of massive stars. It is capable of altering the developmental paths of entire galaxies without the slightest visible cause. The invisible field constantly imposes its strict conditions on all visible matter. Resisting this cosmic dictate is simply impossible. This force is quite capable of invisibly controlling the formation of new planets and star systems. It distributes matter in space according to its own laws, which are completely incomprehensible to humanity. This colossal energy governs gigantic processes that science naively considered to be entirely random. Human civilization constantly lives in an ocean of raging elements, the nature of which it is completely unable to comprehend. Every movement of the Earth in space may be subject to this invisible conductor's baton. The illusion of randomness has finally dissipated. Leading theorists are desperately trying to describe this fifth force using new complex mathematical equations. The planet's brightest minds spend days poring over calculations, trying to find at least some logic in what is happening. But the resulting mathematics turns out to be incredibly convoluted and highly contradictory at even the first expert glance. Attempts to reconcile old physics with new data lead to absurd results. Infinities constantly appear in the formulas, undermining the entire internal coherence of the theory. Intellectual efforts bring no relief. Classical high-performance supercomputers struggle immensely to process such massive and non-standard models. Servers overheat severely while attempting to calculate the infinite possibilities of new particle interactions. Conventional machine logic falters in the face of primordial quantum chaos. Fundamentally new computing power is required to handle such massive amounts of information. Quantum computers are still too weak to solve this global problem. Science has reached an impasse due to a simple lack of technological resources. Formulas derived by theorists mathematically predict the possibility of entire hidden universes existing right next to Earth. These vast worlds may be within arm's reach, yet remain completely out of reach. They may interact weakly with our familiar reality only through this gravitational and quantum anomaly. The prospect of encountering such colossal scales makes even the most steadfast researchers' heads spin. The realization of their own vulnerability weighs heavily on the scientists' minds. Space has turned out to be far more multifaceted and terrifying than even the wildest imaginings. Any hypothetical possibility of controlling such an immense force would forever change the very face of civilization. Humanity would gain access to an inexhaustible source of energy and new ways of traveling through space. However, the real chances of taming this quantum chaos are rapidly and inexorably approaching absolute zero. This energy is too wild and unstable to be contained within earthly generators. Attempting to control it is akin to trying to capture a hurricane in an ordinary glass jar. The outcome of such an experiment is obvious from the start. The newly discovered fifth force appears far too powerful, ancient, and alien for primitive Earth technologies. Absolutely any attempt to artificially interfere with its workings could easily lead to the most catastrophic consequences. Tinkering with the fundamental laws of nature always ends very badly for arrogant researchers. There is a very real and enormous risk that further experiments will trigger a chain reaction of destruction. This process will begin in the deepest microcosm, spreading incredibly quickly in all directions. Escaping such a scenario will be simply impossible. Ultra-powerful modern colliders are quite capable of accidentally tearing apart the fragile, invisible boundary between two realities. A sudden, massive release of fifth force energy could locally destroy all the laws of familiar physics. This would inevitably lead to the rapid disintegration of absolutely all surrounding matter at the fundamental level. Moreover, this destructive process will proceed without the slightest possibility of restoring the original biological state. Scientists are now literally playing with fire in a cramped and completely enclosed space. This space is filled to the brim with extremely unstable quantum explosives. A profound primal fear of the looming unknown is driving many physicists to actively call for extreme caution. They are insistently demanding an immediate halt to the dangerous increase in the operating power of modern colliders. Scientists want to take a long technical pause until all the subatomic processes taking place are fully understood. It is absolutely forbidden to blindly strike with a heavy sledgehammer at a mechanism whose inner workings are completely unknown to researchers. The ultimate cost of a mistake in such incredibly fundamental experiments could be fatal for the entire planet. Carelessness in this matter amounts to a global crime. Harmless scientific curiosity seriously risks turning into the most terrible and irreparable tragedy in the history of the entire human race. For now, this fifth force remains a completely elusive, yet extremely dangerous specter of modern academic science. Its constant, invisible breath chills the blood of all specialists studying the strange graphs of quantum decays. It makes it incredibly clear that all of our familiar reality is merely a random side effect of hidden mechanisms at work. Wild nature makes it clear that it will not tolerate crude interference with its fundamental settings. Perhaps this is the very last major discovery before the complete collapse of earthly science. The full realization of its own total ignorance has been the hardest blow to the global scientific community. For many long centuries, people proudly built their civilization on a firm belief in the unlimited power of the intellect. Scientists were sincerely and quite arrogantly proud that they had been able to describe the complex behavior of distant, bright quasars. They naively considered themselves the rightful masters of nature and the future great conquerors of the boundless cosmos. The beautiful formulas and graphs they derived always provided a false, yet incredibly reassuring sense of security. It seemed that the mind was capable of overcoming absolutely any obstacle. Now this sweet, centuries-old academic illusion has crumbled under the weight of the anomalous behavior of tiny subatomic quarks. Humanity has suddenly found itself in the humiliating position of a primitive tribe in the face of a formidable natural phenomenon. Modern physicists are frantically trying to explain the utterly unknowable using their extremely primitive earthly terms. Every day they come up with new complex theories that are mercilessly rendered obsolete by the very next day's research. All the old scientific dogmas are rapidly losing their practical value in the eyes of new, young specialists. The authority of classical science is plummeting at an enormous speed. The human mind, with its limited analytical capacity, has reached an insurmountable biological limit of its basic computational capabilities. The vast, mysterious universe has simply proven to be far too incredibly complex for the modest evolutionary apparatus of humans. The human brain was shaped to solve simple earthly problems, not to unravel quantum mysteries. The current situation is triggering a very deep and prolonged existential crisis among the most outstanding thinkers of our time. The intellectual elite has sunk into a state of deep collective depression. Faith in the limitless possibilities of science has been completely undermined. Professors at the world's leading prestigious universities no longer have any idea what exactly they should be teaching their students. The basic principles of the universe turned out to be built on very shaky ground, which is now rapidly slipping through their fingers. If the fundamental standard model is incorrect, then the entire history of research is instantly called into question. For centuries, Earth-based science has been moving down a completely false path, creating convenient mathematical abstractions. This had nothing to do with true, real knowledge of the structure of the vast universe. Physics textbooks have become nothing more than collections of beautiful historical fairy tales. The pride of modern researchers turned out to be merely a direct consequence of their profound misunderstanding of the true scale of the universe. Humanity will have to relearn humility before the abyss of the surrounding dark cosmos in a very painful and lengthy process. People must honestly acknowledge their humble place at the very bottom of a vast and unknowable cosmic hierarchy. Global alarm is greatly amplified by the terrifying fact that scientists simply cannot safely stop now. An insatiable academic thirst for knowledge compels them to stubbornly continue these extremely dangerous subatomic experiments. The process of discovery has turned into an uncontrollable obsession. Deep underground colliders continue to violently smash accelerated particles day and night without pause. These massive machines methodically churn out ever-new batches of terrifying mathematical quantum anomalies and paradoxes. Every new terabyte of data obtained only deepens the vast chasm of absolute fundamental incomprehension. Scientists have become true hostages of their own insatiable and highly reckless scientific curiosity. They cannot hit the brakes, even when they see a massive concrete wall ahead. Science has turned into a runaway train without a driver. Cutting-edge physics has definitively turned into an endless, frantic wandering through a confusing labyrinth with the lights turned off. It is quite possible that researchers have come very close to that very boundary beyond which they absolutely should not look. It is quite likely that the true fundamental laws of the universe are deliberately hidden from the eyes of the weak observer. Cold nature may well possess ultra-reliable defense mechanisms against any primitive attempts to crack its code. There is a huge risk of awakening dormant forces that will mercilessly wipe out Earth's civilization. Humanity may vanish like a mere annoying system error. The strange anomaly of quark decay may turn out to be a simple programming glitch in the global matrix. The universal defense system will very soon correct this minor error harshly and mercilessly. The direct consequences of this global cosmic software correction will be absolutely fatal for the planet. The very existence of the solar system may be erased in order to restore the original energy balance. The frightening old idea that all reality is completely illusory no longer sounds like philosophy. It is becoming a harsh conclusion drawn from the most rigorous mathematical calculations. Leading global philosophers and theoretical physicists are now working together in closed scientific centers. They are desperately trying to collectively make sense of this grand collapse of the old and familiar reality. The surrounding classical space and time may well be nothing more than a narrow user interface. This barrier was created solely for the limited biological perception of a far more complex global structure. Just beyond this thin interface lies the true, brutal physics of the fifth force and dark matter. Any access to it is securely blocked at an absolutely insurmountable, forbidden level. Humanity behaves like fish in a small aquarium, who have suddenly realized the existence of the ocean. They have seen the raging waves beyond the thick, transparent glass, but can do nothing about it. It is absolutely impossible to break this glass without enormous risk to their own fragile biological lives. Centuries of existential loneliness in the universe now take on a completely new, grim meaning. Earthlings are securely isolated not only by colossal cosmic distances, but also by their own perception. Biology has become the most secure prison for the inquisitive human mind. Civilization is tightly locked in a narrow, invisible cage made of the four known forces and ordinary matter. People cry out desperately into the endless void, trying to find kindred spirits among the cold stars. But this vast void consists of completely dark matter that completely blocks any radio signals. Messages from other civilizations may pass through the planet every second, completely unnoticed. Technology is simply not tuned to the necessary frequencies of this unknown fifth fundamental force. Humanity remains a deaf and blind observer in a bustling cosmic metropolis. The young human species has been doomed to hopeless solitude within its tiny field of vision. If the best minds are completely incapable of understanding the ordinary behavior of a quark, dreams of the stars are meaningless. What real conquest of deep space can we even speak of with such a level of basic ignorance? Long-distance interstellar travel requires perfect and ultra-precise knowledge of all the laws of physical space. These laws are now officially recognized by modern academic science as completely erroneous. Dreams of cosmic expansion have dissolved into harsh quantum uncertainty. Sweet hopes of colonizing a vast galaxy are instantly shattered by the harsh reality of systemic failures in the microcosm. Hyperspeed spacecraft simply cannot fly in a deep vacuum with unstable physical laws. Navigation will become impossible if fundamental particles suddenly begin to change their properties right in the middle of flight. The future of humanity, as a great and powerful spacefaring species, has suddenly hit a massive dead end. Earthlings are firmly locked onto their home planet, along with their grandiose hopes for greatness, which have completely collapsed. This fundamental scientific impasse is forcing society to urgently reevaluate all of its core values. Politicians and economists are beginning to question the necessity of funding such dangerous research. Huge amounts of public funds are currently being spent on studies that yield nothing but bitter disappointment. In return for their money, taxpayers receive only a primal fear of the looming quantum threat. Governments are gradually beginning to demand that laboratories be shut down so as not to unsettle the public. Public safety is being prioritized over dubious scientific discoveries. Ordinary people are beginning to seriously question the wisdom of such dangerous games with physics. Why force open those invisible doors behind which all-powerful invisible monsters of dark matter lurk? Sometimes absolute and total ignorance is the best way to preserve the planet's psychological peace. Mass global panic and depression could inflict far greater damage on humanity than the threat itself. For many, the voluntary, comforting ignorance of complex physics has become a very reliable emotional refuge. It is better to sleep peacefully, unaware of the abyss right beneath one's feet. Nevertheless, gigantic, expensive machines continue to work monotonously in the deep underground tunnels of Europe. Data from the detectors relentlessly piles up on massive servers, making the anomaly increasingly distinct and proven. A frightening, dense uncertainty thickens in scientific circles with every new experiment conducted. Humanity stands frozen on the very threshold of a monumental revelation, capable of shattering our familiar worldview. It is already impossible to take a step back, and ahead looms only the absolute darkness of the unknown. There is simply no way back. The good old academic illusions are finally dead, and there is no bringing them back to life. The approaching, entirely new reality promises to be incredibly cold, complex, and merciless toward observers. Science has taken an extremely risky and ill-considered step straight into the deep cosmic abyss. And now, this boundless black abyss is studying Earth's researchers with extreme scrutiny and cold detachment. The gaze of this unknown force makes even the most pragmatic and hardened skeptics shudder. The game of hide-and-seek with the universe has reached its logical conclusion. The world's cutting-edge science has suddenly turned into a pitiful attempt to read a book locked tight with a padlock. The pages of this enormous tome are glued together by an unknown energy, and the letters constantly change their shapes. Humanity currently has absolutely no chance of finding the correct physical key to this mechanism. Perhaps the real hidden truth lies infinitely far beyond the limits of our limited perception. This knowledge may require a completely different structure of the brain and nervous system. Earthlings will have to resign themselves to the role of eternal students in this harsh school. The extremely primitive human brain is simply physically incapable of fully comprehending the gigantic scale of this structure. Neural connections break down when attempting to imagine the multidimensional spaces of the fifth force. The long biological evolution on Earth has not prepared humans at all to understand phenomena of such colossal magnitude. The survival of the species has always depended on the ability to make fire and build strong, safe dwellings. The ability to reflect on the behavior of quarks turned out to be merely an accidental byproduct of the development of intelligence. This product is now causing obvious systemic failures. The outcome of this grand scientific drama remains completely unclear and unpredictable for everyone. We can only hope that the invisible mechanisms of the universe will not take notice of the bustling activity of Earth's scientists. Perhaps humanity will have to abandon forever its attempts to penetrate the very essence of fundamental matter. Humility before the unknowable may become the main lesson of all of human history. Absolute ignorance transforms from a shameful fact into the sole condition for the species' safe survival. The stars will continue their cold radiance, forever keeping silent about their true laws. We are now like blind, frantic ants, desperately and unsuccessfully trying to understand the inner workings of a modern nuclear reactor. All that remains for us is to passively and fearfully observe the strange quantum anomalies of the ether and make timid guesses about their causes. And every new bold conjecture by alarmed astrophysicists invariably turns out to be many times more terrifying than absolutely all previous theories. We wander completely blind in impenetrable cosmic darkness, without even the slightest reliable guidepost for our salvation. Fundamental science has turned into an endless, nervous wandering through a vast labyrinth with our eyes tightly shut in terror. Our familiar, safe reality has suddenly turned out to be completely different from what we had always naively imagined. It is far deeper, much darker, and incomparably more complex than any of our wildest and most grandiose fantasies. Something truly very powerful and hidden is deliberately and ruthlessly blocking all meaningful signals from the deep, cold cosmos. And we still have absolutely no idea why this terrifying process is happening right around us. Perhaps it would be much better for us never to learn this truly terrifying and shocking fundamental truth.